Hi, I'm Alex from the Zscaler Customer Success Engineering team. In this series of short videos, we're taking a look at the baseline recommendations for the inspection of TLS encrypted web traffic. This is part 3, how to start inspecting. It's best to think of SSL inspection as a journey. To get started, you should do some pre-work. This includes getting buy-in from stakeholders, including legal and HR leaders. Additionally, you may need to work with workers' council type organizations in some of the countries you're based in. You should build a rollout plan and success criteria so that you know when and how you're deploying and what counts as a successful deployment. And you should also build a plan for end user communication, including an acceptable use policy. Next, you should work on your certificates. This includes root certificate authority selection and your deployment strategy for certificates. Then you generally want to do the initial rollout. You'll pick pilot users and locations, identify initial use cases, and exempt critical applications. From this, you'll expand your rollout, managing exceptions as they pop up, and accelerating as confidence grows. And you'll also want to make sure that you build a way to measure and report adoption of SSL inspection to track and report on your progress. Here are a few deployment best practices. First, you'll want to start with testing with pilot users, a pilot location, and pilot applications. Select between Zscaler's root certificate authority or your own public key infrastructure. Distribute this root certificate to your endpoints. The best way to do this is to use Zscaler Client Connector. Identify risky URL categories, which should be inspected first, as a starting point for SSL inspection. Define bypasses for applications that are critical and which you know do certificate pinning. Then, broaden inspection to all categories, not just the risky URL ones, excluding, of course, categories that you've identified with the help of HR and your other partners should not be inspected. When building exclusions, use FQDNs or domains, not IP addresses. Finally, make sure you operationalize this process, identifying lessons learned in the course of deploying SSL and making sure that you build these lessons into your processes. Here are some common objections that you might run into in the course of discussing this with stakeholders, workers' councils, and other entities involved in this process. The first one is generally centered around privacy, users not wanting you to see what they're doing on the internet. There are a few important points to understand in order to respond to this objection. One, all scanning is performed in memory inside the Zscaler service edges. This is entirely automated, and no human being ever has access to the contents of an encrypted transaction. Two, in most countries, not all, and you should check with your legal department to make sure whether or not a specific country falls under this bucket, there is no obligation to seek consent to do SSL inspection, only to inform your users. Finally, you can define and build a granular policy that allows you to exclude certain content that shouldn't be inspected, such as healthcare or financial category websites, if you don't wish to do this. The second type of objections you may run into are centered around performance, particularly from people who were used to the way SSL inspection was done in the past, where it would generate a lot of latency. For this, the most important thing to understand is that SSL inspection is done fully in line with dedicated accelerator hardware inside every Zscaler service edge. As such, SSL inspection itself will not result in additional proxy latency, although you will of course see a slight impact, 1 to 5 milliseconds, as security policy engines run on the traffic which can now be inspected. For compliance challenges specifically, it's important to understand that Zscaler has a data processing agreement that is published on our website and should cover most objections. That your acceptable use policy will reinforce the requirement to protect your corporate resources. This policy has to be kept up to date and made available to your users. To gain approval from workers' council style organizations, make sure that they understand the purpose is to protect users, not to intercept their traffic or analyze their digital behavior. Finally, it's important to understand that GDPR and other legislation like it do not prohibit the usage of personally identifying information in this manner. However, depending on the legislation, certain carve-outs or exceptions might be legally required, so make sure that you check with your legal department. That's it for this video. In the next video, we'll talk about the SSL model policy and how you should build your own inspection policy.